we'll get right into it. Got it. Recording in progress. Okay, got it. Okay, I'd like to call to order the April 4th meeting of the Woodstock Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency Commission. The agenda was mailed to everyone, and so I'd like to have a roll call of members present. I'll start it off. Mark Parker,
William Rowinski,
Marla Butts,
Stuart Peasley, alternate. I guess I gotta be voted in.
yes, thank you. So I'll, as chairman, I'll move and move accept Stuart Peasley in for tonight's meeting as a voting member, as an alternate for tonight. Okay. Minutes of the previous business meeting.
Bill Rowinski, I have one correction.
Go ahead, Bill, what you got?
On the second page, pending applications, under B, Roman numeral 4, Marla Butts requests and engineer. Need to take the D out, request and engineer.
Or request that an engineer certify? Yeah.
Could just be
Yeah,
AN,
yeah, AN, yeah, request an engineer, yep, got it.
so that D is taken out. And the other one's a spelling of a name, but I don't know that that's Larry Aquarulo. There should be a U between the R and the L.
page
That
are you
appears-
on?
That appears in two different places.
Where are you on the agenda for that name spelling?
I mean, the minutes.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
the minutes, yeah.
Okay, under roll,
Where in the minutes?
the second to the last line and roll call.
Got it. Larry, ACQ UARULO.
UL.
Got
And
it.
then once again, on the second page, pending applications, the Roman numeral 3, neighbors Darrell Weldon and Larry Aquarulo.
Rulo, got it.
Other than that, I generally didn't find anything objectionable or that needs to be changed for meaning.
So I have one change on page 2, item 6B5. Marla Butts made a motion to accept application. That should read motion to approve application.
Six, letter B, Roman
5.
numeral 5. Should be what? Marla,
Motion to approve,
motion to approve
not to
application.
accept. We weren't accepting the application, we were approving it.
That's correct. I saw that, but I didn't make a note of it.
And then lastly, I needed to ask other people's recollection on this. Under 6A, that's the Bentley application. Because the application has been withdrawn at this time, the only actions that can be made by the commission are to monitor the property and to be sure all information is properly distributed to engineers and parties involved. The application will be revisited when resubmitted by Mr. Bentley. And I thought that we had requested that it be resubmitted within 90 days of the withdrawal. Is that anybody else's recollection? I could be wrong on that.
I agree. I think that's what I remember hearing. Stuart speaking.
Bill Rowinski, I believe we had some statements as such. I don't remember the exact term, but it certainly wasn't longer than that.
So I think then all we need to do is add at the end of the sentence, this application will be revisited when resubmitted by James Bentley to be within 90 days of withdrawal. Just add at the end of that sentence. to be within 90 days of the withdrawal date.
Very good.
And that's it. That's all I found.
Anyone like to make a motion that the minutes be accepted as revised?
Bill
I move to
Marinski-
accept the, oh, go ahead, Bill.
Okay. Bill Marinsky, I move to accept the motions from the Monday, March 7th, 2022 Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency minutes as revised.
I second that motion.
Motion's been
Marla
made by,
Butts.
motion's been made by Bill Rowinski and seconded by Marla Butts to accept the minutes as revised. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, opposed, abstained, so moved. Okay. Pending applications. No, yep, pending applications, Roman numeral 5, letter A, application 01-22-04, George and Carolyn Luby, 534 Senexit Road, clean existing farm pond, received on February 7th, 2022. Okay, any further questions, submittals? Let's see.
I do, Marla Butts speaking. I do have a question on the site plan that Ashley forwarded to us electronically today. That's the one that was developed back in the 90s. Initially, the base map was developed in the 90s. And with, it has notations on it regarding the pond. It identifies a location for a proposed turbidity curtain. And that is inappropriate installation location for a turbidity curtain. Turbidity curtains are not supposed to be placed across flowing water. They're usually used in standing water. So if the turbidity curtain had been placed in the pond itself, not in the channel, whereby the clean water that was coming into the pond would be kept isolated from the water that's leaving, that would be better than putting it in the channel downstream. That's an inappropriate location. It says right on page 51141 of the 2002 Connecticut Guidelines for Soil Erosion Sediment Control, turbidity curtains shall not be extended across channel flows. So that's not a correct installation for the silt fence, turbidity curtain, excuse me. But I think if they move that up to where the outflow is, but in the pond itself, so that it's not actually in the channel, so that there would be an ability for the water to flow. The problem with turbidity curtains is that they don't pass water real fast. And usually they're used to isolate the construction area from the clean water, so that the construction water stays separated from the clean water, because they don't filter water that well. They act more as a barrier, as a curtain that stops things from going. But if they are dewatering the pond, or they're doing it during a period of no flow, then they wouldn't need the turbidity curtain anyways. So if we have an unusually dry summer and there's next to no flow coming out of the 42-inch RCP from the road, then they probably wouldn't have much need to have a control there at all, because there wouldn't be anything flowing out of the pond to begin with. Is the contractor here on the Zoom meeting? I see the Lubies are here in the Zoom meeting.
How you doing, Mel?
Good, good. You see my concern about using a turbidity curtain actually in the channel?
Yeah,
I mean, you would do better if you, instead of a turbidity curtain, you could use potentially, I have seen them use a hay bale stuck between chicken wire fences, or loose hay put between chicken wire fences. The problem is when you take the control out, you get a slug of sediment that goes downstream. It's hard to control. But it can filter very small amounts of water. So that's a possibility. Any thoughts?
yeah, I agree with you, but and I understand, we use turbidity curtains often, but I was thinking hopefully that when we're working, there really won't be much of any flow. And in
Yeah,
an
that's what I'm
extremely low-
thinking. Yeah, if the pond is clean during times of low flow, when there's next to no flow in that channel, then I don't think that that'll be a problem. But I wouldn't have the turbidity curtain going across the stream. I'd rather have you use a hay bale check dam, but that's not even going to be effective if there's water flowing, because then it's not going to filter it that well. So I think I could go with an approval that says that it can only occur during a time of low flow. And that would be in August, most likely, when the lowest flows occur. Unless we have an unusual year like we did last year. We had so much rain in July that it was incredible. But that's my thoughts.
Bill Rowinski here. I have a question. You were planning to do some sort of diversion to get the brook to bypass the pond to go to that existing tail race. Was that going to be by manipulating existing materials that are there, or are you going to have to bring something in to create that dam or that channel?
I think we're not really, no, we're going to manipulate existing. Is a good way of saying it.
So you're not going to bring in any new material for that?
No, we're not. Like you said, rearranging what's there.
Okay.
Did we get the description of this in writing of the methodology, or was it just a verbal from last meeting? Ashley, what do you have in the file for this?
I have an official write-up.
There are multiple views in that file,
In which one? This one?
that one, yeah. Or multiple documents. You go to the upper right and you can tab through them, or with the arrow.
Oh, yeah,
The others are just pictures, I believe.
yeah. Yeah, this is the only writing I have.
Just a question for the contractor. How long do you anticipate this work to take? How many days?
Excuse me? I didn't quite hear you.
How many days do you expect that it'll take to do the pond cleaning?
Oh, I expect one day to get it ready, and I expect to easily do it in a day.
Okay, so this is a very short exposure time. I don't have a problem if it's only going to be a day's worth of time. to be able to go through it, the chances of it causing much of a problem is going to be pretty small. Because it's a very small pond to begin with. It's not like Mr. Petros, which is much larger than this.
Bill Rowinski here. That being said, if you look at the application here that we have, says pond supplies water to resident livestock, and I know there's been cattle there, and it's existing farm pond. And I bring up the question whether we can approve this as a agricultural exemption.
Marla Butt speaking, yeah, I think you can do it under that, but you can also potentially do it as a non-regulated use under conservation of soil and water. Either one would fit. I think it's better for agriculture, but it's not really used for agriculture in and of itself. I think it's better if we use it as a non-regulated use under conservation of soil and water, because it doesn't alter the natural significant wetland, natural or significant, wait a minute, I'm not getting my words right. The natural characteristics of that wetland or water course. It will basically be turned back to what it was before. So I would suggest that we do it as a non-regulated use under paragraph B of section 4 of the regs, as a non-regulated use for conservation of soil and water.
I'm okay with that.
Is that okay?
Yep.
And so I move to approve application 01-22-04 by George and Carolyn Louie at 534 Senexic Road for cleaning of an existing quarter-acre farm pond as a non-regulated use under the provision of conservation of soil and water by the Wetlands Regulations, Section 4B.
Second by Bill Rowinski.
Motion has been made by Marla Butts, seconded by Bill Rowinski, to approve application 01-22-04, cleaning of existing farm pond as a non-regulated use under section 4. I would trust that our recording secretary will get the language off of the tape to get it down in written form. But are there any more questions or concerns? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, abstained, so moved.
Done.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
day. This is so.
Okay. Moving on to letter B under Roman numeral 5. We have application 02-22-07, Francis and Lucy Jolly, Indian Spring Road. New home construction, received March 7th, 2022. Okay. Okay, we didn't need any more. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Marla Butts recommended that this application be processed. She requests more information from the engineer be provided for the next meeting. Okay, so do we have that? Is that in our packet?
Don't believe that there was anything new, but the representative for the applicant is here.
I can't tell from the reading of last month's minutes what those extra information was. Marla, can you remember?
I'm just looking to see what the other paperwork was like for that. Hold on. I think this is the one that said there was information that was wrong on the on the drawing. Was referencing Fungi Lake when it was actually Witch's Woods.
Got it. That's right. Looking at sub Roman numeral 2, Bill Rowinski noted the errors include mislabeling of the lake, etc.
I believe we didn't have an accurate locust map. Bill Rowinski.
Yep. So if the engineer or if the representatives are here tonight, we need to get that extra information from you.
Okay, yes, for the record, my name is Norm Tebow, Killingly Engineering Associates. This is actually the first I'm hearing of this. I had a prior commitment and could not attend last month's meeting. The request for additional information was never relayed to me. So this is the first I've heard of it this evening. So other than the lake labeling and the locust map, if there are other items, I would certainly appreciate knowing what
Yeah.
those are.
Do you know if the Northeast District Department of Health has approved the septic design yet?
Yes, it was approved quite some time ago, actually.
And was that included in the application documents?
I'm not sure if it was. I don't think it was, and the only reason being, it did say CC. The approval that we got said that the town was copied on it. So,
Okay, well, we don't have it in our files, so we won't render a decision on this application this month. It'll have to wait till next month. So if you could forward a copy of the Northeast District Department of Health's design approval for the septic system and a revised plan correctly identifying the location of the property as being on Witch's Woods.
And the correct lot number. Because it was noted in
Yeah,
our
I do
minutes
believe-
that the lot location marked for the application is not the correct lot. So we just need to get that
Okay.
corrected. Yeah.
okay.
Just for the record, I did send an email to you, Norm, but you must not have gotten it, but I did have it stating everything on 3/8/22. So I can forward that again to you, but I just want to put it out there that I did send an email.
Okay.
Must have
I
gotten it.
will look back. I don't recall seeing it, and I'm certainly not saying it wasn't because you didn't send it. So
Sure.
Mark, I move we table this application till next month. Pending receipt of the changes and the additional information.
Second by Bill Rowinski.
Motion's been made by Marla Butt, seconded by Bill Rowinski to table this application. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained, so moved.
okay.
Okay,
Well, we'll see you
thank
next
you,
month.
Norm. Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, letter C, under pending applications. We have application 03-22-09. Randy and Karen LeBeau, 15 Laurel Hill Drive, construct stone lake wall. Received March 7th. I see that Randy and Karen are on the call tonight. You guys have anything to add or any representative to add?
We added the drawing a couple days after the last meeting.
So I think Ashley has it there, was submitted.
Yep, it is in your packets,
Okay.
and I can pull it up if you need me to.
Bill Rowinski.
So how
one
high is
question-
the water? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Bill Rowinski, one question. Were you planning to be purchasing stone that's rectangular in form like that, or were you using existing stone?
They were bringing in the same blue stone as we already had put in.
Okay. So it will be generally rectangular shape and flat?
Correct.
Okay.
And Marla Butt speaking, I got a call from Ashley regarding whether or not you could move forward without, before this meeting. And I said, no, technically not, because it's actually in the water, but you were concerned about the water coming up. And has the water been started coming up, or is it in
The dam
now
is
at the toe of
closed.
your old wall?
The dam is closed at this time and the water is coming up. So
So it looks like you, in that case, you would, if you were going to be doing the work this time of year, has it come up all the way?
no, I think it's still got more to go.
Okay. So you could use a silt fence with straw wattles. Even still, you can use silt fence in standing water.
Okay.
That is a possibility as long as, because the water's not very deep.
Correct.
Yeah, and you could use the wattles to cove in the backside of the silt fence, because you're probably not going to have an ability to dig it in if the water's standing there. It'll be a little more difficult to put the silt fence in, but you could use it when in shallow
Okay.
water. Silt fence can be used to isolate the construction activity
Okay.
from the clean water. I don't have any problem with the application as it stands now, providing they put in the controls as they showed on the application. That it's on the back side of your little narrative in your cross section. It's on the back side of this document.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep,
Right.
that's it.
Right.
Yep.
So I will move to approve application 03-22-09, Randy and Karen LeBeau, 15 Laurelwood Drive, to construct a stone wall
No,
as shown in the plans as amended by
Laura-
his submission.
excuse me. Laurel
Mhm.
Hill Drive.
Sorry, if I said it wrong, I meant,
Yep.
well, Laurel Hill Drive.
Correct.
Second by Bill Rowinski.
Motion's been made by Marla Butts, seconded by Bill Rowinski to approve application 03-22-09 at 15 Laurel Hill Drive. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed?
welcome.
Thank you. So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Okay. Roman numeral 6, new applications. None here on my hard copy. Were any submitted today, Ashley?
Nope, none were submitted. Sorry, I
Okay.
had to find the unmute button.
Okay. Well, then let's move on to administrative business. Roman numeral 7A, engineered report from Joe Palulik for 155 Payne Road.
Bill Rowinski, I did submit a site report to Ashley with some pictures. I didn't double check the Zoom documents to see if it's there, but I requested she put it there.
It is. I can pull it up.
Okay, to scroll down some more.
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
Thank you, Bill.
Should have gotten Joe's
yes.
write up in your packets. I
Question,
know-
Ashley.
Yep.
Has the first selectman had a chance to take a look at Mr. Pulick's report?
He has not responded to it, but I have talked to Mr. John Navarro. I know he talked to Mr. Palulik. They came to an agreement on some things. I believe Mr. Navarro is going to work with and or speak with the construction person who is at Mr. Petro's property right now. I know he was also told about some state funding that might pay for some of the work as well. So I know John is looking into it. And I know that he's talked to the first selectman. The first selectman has not responded to myself personally, but I know he's been in contact with John.
Okay. The reason why I ask those questions is because Joe Pulick talks about a phase 1 building a permanent sedimentation basin that the town could periodically clean out before it enters into Petro's property. And it has certain design requirements, and didn't know if they were looking at doing that and whether or not a drainage easement was required for that. So that would be the first, he's recommending that as the first step, and I didn't know whether or not the town was interested in doing that or not. And then phase 2, he talks about doing quite a bit of manipulation of runoff actually on Payne Road, which is probably fairly costly based upon the length of piping that they were talking about. And also the grouted stone channel or riprap channel. And I suspect that there would probably I don't know whether or not it has to be grouted. That's an engineering call. And he didn't provide any estimation for the engineering design, but that would all have to be designed up, to do that kind of channel stabilization. It's not something you want to just throw some stone in the eroded ditch and hope it holds.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't, you can end up with a worse mess. Right now, I don't see as though the Wetlands Commission has any authority to require anything, But I do think the paperwork is there. The town has a responsibility and a potential liability to take some action to abate sedimentation of wetlands and watercourses on Mr. Petro's property. I'm just not sure how far that can go, how far the Wetlands Commission can take that. I think it's taken it as far as it can take, and the rest of it potentially becomes a civil matter between the town and Mr. Petro. I don't know how anybody else feels about that.
Bill Rowinski, I would have to agree with you, Marla. And it was helpful, at least for Joe to point out that the Board of Selectmen by default is the Town Erosion and Sediment Control Board. I don't know if they're familiar with that that task that they are assigned that tasks in absence of an official board. I don't know if that's they've ever had to do any action as that type of a board, but at least now that's out in the open that they have a responsibility to at least investigate that. Yeah,
the flood and erosion control boards were established after the flood of 1955. And it's a statute. And what it was designed to do was provide a pass through of state monies to the municipalities following damage from a flood. And so the likelihood of there being any monies available to fix this would probably not be there at this point in time. But that's worth checking into. I suspect that DEEP doesn't even remember that there are flood and erosion control boards. They've been so decimated by staffing losses. But it doesn't hurt for the town to look into that to see if there could be any funding. And if not, is it possible that they could get their legislator to get a bill passed to provide for that funding to get that work done? And so at this juncture, I think probably the Board of Selectmen checking with their legislative representative, either their senator or their representative, to find out what funding could be available from the town for the town, and how could they make arrangements for getting that funding, whether it is a special act or is there other monies that the state has. Are there monies under DOT, the Connecticut Department of Transportation, that might be made available for this kind of repair work?
Right. And I do know there's a statewide hazard mitigation plan that probably has, I'm not all that familiar. I just know that the plan exists, and I know staff that I've worked with that have worked on that plan. And then there's also the statewide climate change plan. And I think there's some provisions in that plan for, for assisting towns with, the increased precipitation events that are going to be anticipated with climate change. So, maybe it's worth taking a look at those two plans and see if there's some sort of something available.
Stuart Peasley here. I have a question.
Right.
The report by Mr. Pylek was, he was hired by the town for this?
Now, Mr. Palulik is a retired state engineer for the NRCS, and he happens to live in town. And he happens to be, I believe he's an elected alternate on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Is that correct, Ashley? Yeah, and yeah, so was he doing this pro bono
Yes.
as a favor to the town?
Yep.
But he is a professional engineer.
All right, just the question really leads to the next question, is the extent of liability or responsibility. So I had always, I mean, it's good to understand more clearly now the source of water causing the erosion. I had thought that perhaps it was other properties involved, but since it's only the road, then it really just makes it more clear about what the town's role is or what it can be, should be, all that. But
Bill Rowinski, it's the road and, I mean, everything kind of comes down to what happens at the road. So it's also the drainage from the other side, which, there maybe not be much that we could do about that, but, the problem with the additional pipe has created the additional flows, and there's significant flow down the side of the Payne Road anyways. And there's gonna be only more problems. And even though Mr. Petro has cleared up a lot of the area and, dredged the pond and everything, it's only gonna be coming back and maybe even worse if nothing is done. And having the basin right at the road there is probably gonna be the best idea to at least catch sediment and have some sort of mechanism for periodically maintaining that catch area.
by the town.
Yes,
Would that be on town property? Would that be able to be contained within town property?
I kind of doubt it. I don't know where the lot lines are, but it would probably extend into Mr. Petro's property, so there would have to be some sort of an easement.
Well, it's very helpful.
And as far as Mr. Palulik's qualifications, he seems very well versed in the engineering end of it and has been involved in big flood control projects in various areas in the Northeast. And he seems to be well qualified to make these determinations for this particular site.
The report looks good. It's very helpful.
I think it would behoove the town, either through the Public Works Office or the Board of Selectmen, to pursue a solution to this problem. I think the minutes should show that.
I would agree, Bill Rowinski.
Yeah, I also agreed. Stuart Peasley. That's kind of what we laid out in that letter originally. So I think this is when we did write that letter last fall, I think it was. So this fulfills that task. Being able to make a recommendation from here on will, just give a clear path. And Mr. Petro should be happy that we're making progress, that we were able at least to provide some help with that.
Right.
Well, it also opened us up to possible other alternatives and alternative funding also.
Mhm.
I don't have any further questions or comments, Bill Rowinski.
Well, but neither do I.
Okay. All right, so then we'll move on to item number B. Roman numeral 7, letter B. Review, revise the inland wetlands and agency forms and bylaws.
Bill Rowinski, before we go there, I would like if either I or Ashley can give you a little bit of an update about the planning and zoning meeting concerning the Flynn proposal for Joy Road. And I have comments on the applications that might have played into that.
Okay, let me get that planning and zoning meeting for Flynn Road.
No, Joy Road,
Oh, Joy Road.
the Flynn application, I believe it was Flynn on the Spalding property.
Yeah, when they came to they had a lot that they had to go to inland wetlands and planning and zoning to make a buildable lot, because it was when they subdivided it, they made it just an agricultural lot until they came back to all the commissions for their approval. And you guys had decided it would be an agent sign off once we got health approval. I could probably pull it up if you give me a second, but Bill, if you want to start.
Yeah, if you can pull up the new map. Apparently, the map that we were given was incomplete. And there's a water course that was left off or never put in the original map. So there was discussion on whether, at the planning and zoning, whether our original determination was valid, because we didn't have that information when we made our determination of an agent sign off.
And what were they doing with the water course?
Nothing. It was just not on the original map that we made our determination from. So we had incomplete information.
Okay,
And even at that, they didn't put 125-foot upland review line for the water course. You can see the water course, it's labeled water course coming down the left
Mhm.
side. That was not on our map that we were given. So as it turned, you know, I had a little discussion with a member of planning and zoning about procedure, and it was hashed out during the planning and zoning meeting. And having seen it, I don't have a whole lot of objections because it's further into the wetland. Ashley felt comfortable still making the comfortable and confident making the determination as the wetland agent sign off. And it came down to that they were okay with going with that because we had made that original determination that she was able to sign off on that. And having seen it, it doesn't really change a whole lot in our determination. But
Marla, but speaking, I would agree, based on what the map that I'm looking at, it still would be a wetlands agent approval.
Yeah.
And as long as they had Northeast District Department of Health approval for this particular drawing, then I don't see that as being a problem.
I would, Bill Rowinski, I would have to agree. The only comment I could have made, and that is in regard to our applications at the time. If I was asked to speak at that meeting, and I was online for it just in case. There's one thing on our short form that's not on our long form. And the thing that's on the short form is a sentence that says, in evaluating this application, the agency has relied on information provided by the applicant, and if such information subsequently proves to be false, deceptive, incomplete, and/or inaccurate, this permit may be modified, suspended, or revoked. Now that's on the short form, and it wasn't on the long form. So the fact that that was not on the long form, I don't know that we would have any other recourse there anyways,
Recourse in terms of,
Okay, so the
in terms of revoking any part of that declaration
on the short form or the long form?
on the long form, but they use the long form.
In order for it to take effect, it should be on both forms.
That's
Well,
correct.
technically, it's in the regulations. So the fact that you're reiterating it on an application form is just by way of information. It's not controlling. The regs are controlling. And in order to suspend or revoke or modify, to suspend or revoke a permit, you have to go through a hearing process where there's an ability for the permittee to show cause why the permit should not be suspended or revoked. The commission can modify a permit at the request of the applicant. They wouldn't do it independently on its own, and it doesn't require a hearing if there was no hearing held on the original one, as long as you're not increasing the scope of the project. meaning scope of the work, the authorized work. So the fact that it doesn't contain the language in the long form, but it contains it in the short form, probably has no actual effect other than advising the applicant of what could happen to them if they don't give us good information. I'm not worried about that, but it should be on, if you're going to put it on the short form, it should be on the long form too, but it's not required because it's in the regulations. Sometimes it's helpful maybe just to have like a little handout that goes with any permit or any application that sets forth those requirements that are in the regulations, as to, you know, what can happen if the commission has relied on false, inaccurate, or deceptive information, or a transfer of permits, information about expiration of permits. All that could be on a little handout or a little attachment that goes with the application form, or if there's the actual permit issued on the permit itself. But I don't think Woodstock issues individual permits. They use the application form sign off, correct? Yeah, so it would just have to be an additional sheet, but the regulations in this case would control that. I think it's smart to have it on there, though.
Marla, this is Stuart. I think it's really smart because one, it does provide clear instructions to the applicant that, you know, if they do, or if there is any like inaccurate or deceptive information, they're responsible. And I think that's just a cautionary note that should be placed on there. I'm just wondering, I like that you're suggesting a little handout thing. I'm wondering if we should put that note in the permitting guide.
Oh, yeah, probably should
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
Yep. And also perhaps information about, you know, that permits are not transferable without the permission of the commission. Because
Yeah.
they're not like, you know, subdivision approvals. They don't run with the land, they run with the individual, whoever
Right.
applied for them.
Non-transferable.
And I can't recall if the permits, if the regulations have a section in there about if their permit is about to expire, if you have to submit a request for extension like 120 days before the expiration date. I don't know if there's anything in there. I don't have the regs in front of me. So I don't know, but that could be another item if there is something in the regulations about timeliness of submission of request for extension of permits. So far, I don't think we've even had a request to extend a permit. Bill, did you think that the Planning and Zoning Commission needed anything further from us?
No, not at this point.
Okay,
They have what they want and they're pretty much seem to be determined to make their determination. And like I said, Ashley presented herself very well and competently and confidently, and she did a great job. And there was no issues that I saw.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
good job.
So we have, I assume these are proposed new applications in our packet.
Yes.
Application forms, yep.
Yeah, I don't have the original, so I did create new ones. We can change anything you want. This was just kind of the way I put it together from what we had. I did kind of look at the ones in Thompson from Marlestown, which she had recommended. So I will take any feedback. If you like them, if you hate them, we can move forward however.
So on the first page, under your little blocks for application number.
Yep.
I would add in a receipt date.
Okay.
Or have a place for putting a stamp for a receipt date. You know, I don't know if you have like a stamp, a
Yep.
date stamp that says received. I don't know if there's anything like that there. Otherwise, be handwritten in what the receipt date was so that we know if it's an individual permit application, then we have timelines that run off of that.
Sure.
And even it's appropriate for uses permitted as of right, do not have timelines by which the commission has to render a decision.
Okay.
But it's useful to have a receipt date for subsequent reference. Then on the one for application for a permit on page 2. Item 3. Purpose and description of activity for which the authorization, if requested. I think that should have been is requested.
Yep.
So change the F to an S. And then under attach a diagram, drawing, or plot plan of sufficient detail to portray and the proposed activity in relation to wetlands and water courses. We should talk about what level of detail do we need to have in some site plans. For example, some of them should actually have delineated wetlands delineated by a soil scientist. And it should have a legend. There's a number of things that should be in there. So I think that needs to be a little more fleshed out. And because we don't use the soil map as a determinant as to whether or not there's any wetlands there. It's the delineation by a soil scientist that determines whether it's subject to regulation. Small stuff like things that border a lake or that kind of thing, you may not need to have a soil scientist because it's a water course, and you'll know if there's any wetlands that could swamps, marshes, or bogs that could be there, which would indicate you might want to have a soil scientist do the delineation. So the level of detail has to kind of go along with whatever the nature of the application is. I know that I have taken drawings for wetlands agent approvals on MapGeo, which is an application the town of Thompson has where you can actually put on it scaled measurements. So if you wanted to put on a shed, you were putting in a shed, you could actually measure it up and draw it in. It's because those are to scale. And they don't take a surveyor to have to do that if the property is large enough. But for small properties like lake properties, you really should have the property boundaries. So you really don't want necessarily a drawing if somebody's doing any significant grading work. And they should be able to get some of that from the land records. If there was a subdivision, there might be excerpts that they can take from the recorded Mylars. Just like Mr. Luby did from that application that he had earlier tonight. That was, I believe, a gravel mining permit. I think that's what it looked like. And he used that to be the basis for putting in a new application. And that was acceptable. I would find that fine. But a lot of times applicants come in with just hand drawings that really are hard to decipher they're not to scale, and they don't have good measurements. So I think sometimes applicants have to be a little better in presenting their drawings. I would work on that section a little more regarding what kind of plan you're going to have.
Okay.
I think any work actually in wetlands or water courses needs to have a delineation by a soil scientist, which means it would have to be put on a surveyed map, a map done by a land surveyor, if not a professional engineer.
So any work done in it, we should make that, you could put that on there, any work done within a wetlands. Should have that.
Yeah. A lot of them, like say, for example, Mr. Petra's property, the wetlands were flagged when the subdivision was done, so he could use the record drawing because they were already delineated on that map. But sometimes, you know, lands have not had delineations and they want to build a house, or they want to add a barn, or they want to do some grading work, you know, and you really don't know where the property boundaries are. You really don't know where the actual wetlands boundary is, and they really should have them flagged and surveyed onto a map if they're going to be doing any work in them. I know there's a cost involved in that, but I think that's useful spending of money. Ashley, can you tell me when the subdivision applications come through, do the subdivision regulations require that wetlands be delineated by a qualified soil scientist on their plans?
That is not something I know off the top of my head. I can take a look for you.
Okay. Yeah, if it's not, then that would be something that I think would be advisable for them to add into their site drawings to require that all wetlands must be delineated by a qualified soil scientist and marked and placed on the drawings, placed on the plans, site plans, with the name of the soil scientist who did the delineation.
Just out of curiosity, could you have somebody do that? Is a professional engineer qualified to do it? If they've had a lot of,
To delineate soils? I can hardly hear you, Stuart.
sorry, my speaker was off. Is it possible for a professional engineer to demarcate wetlands if they have a lot of experience with it?
No, they have to be a qualified soil scientist, and the qualifications are set by the federal government.
Okay.
And they might be a professional engineer that meets the qualifications. That could happen because there's a lot of professional engineers who are licensed surveyors.
Right.
But typically that's a specialty that most professional engineers hire somebody to do the delineation.
That empirical, that knowledge is applicable because, you know, like you say, a lot of engineers are surveyors and they have a lot of experience with this and you know.
And unfortunately, the law is pretty clear about that wetlands are delineated by a qualified soil scientist.
Okay.
And an engineer or a land surveyor might be able to identify swamps, marshes, and bogs, which technically are, by definition, are water courses under the Act. So a land surveyor could say, this is the edge of the swamp, but that's not necessarily the wetlands delineation because they're not always synonymous. They do overlap, but they're not exactly the same. The vegetation can show up one way, but the soils can show up slightly different, particularly when you're dealing with floodplain soils. You can have well-drained floodplain soils that are regulated as wetlands and don't look like they're wet at all, but they're classified as wetland soils because they're created by flooding activity.
Bill Rowinski, just a comment on that. The label professional or title professional engineer, you should look at that as a level of certification and not in any particular field. Because you can be a professional engineer in electrical engineering and mechanical engineering. It's just that you've gone through certain processes to get certified. So the title professional engineer doesn't mean that you're an expert in any one particular field.
It's like being a doctor, a physician. You can be a doctor, but if you're a podiatrist, you're not going to work on somebody's head.
Yeah, well, I'm not talking about bringing a mechanical or structural engineer out to the work. I'd be looking at a civil engineer that had surveying experience and many, many years of mapping out and drawing wetlands. And just wondering if they'd be qualified.
Nope. Unless they meet the government's qualifications. There's a certain amount of training you have to have in soils and soil morphology and certain amount of experience. So, yeah, I have the standards. If Ashley, you ever need them, I have the standards at my office.
Okay.
Because I had somebody who came in from Rhode Island to do work on a project in Thompson, and they were not a member of the Southern New England, the Soil Society of Southern New England, which is an organization of soil scientists that meet all the qualifications for the federal government. And if you're a member of that society, then you clearly meet those qualifications. Well, this individual was not a member of that society. So I had to go ask him for his transcripts and his experience and training, and had to evaluate him for whether or not he could qualify as a soil scientist, and he did. So,
Well, I have a question pertaining to this. It's just, and that's why I ask these questions. The case in point, there was an existing wetlands, and it was delineated by a soil scientist, but the engineer who drew it up on the site survey, to me, in my opinion, didn't draw it accurately, because when I made a site visit and looked at it, the delineation of the wetlands was up the slope. It was not even close to the wetlands. And I didn't know if that was a drafting error or what, but I asked. I mean, there wasn't any visible vegetation that I normally see in wetlands, but it still was considered uplands, which to me was a little mysterious. I didn't know, like I say, whether it was a drafting error or just something else that I wasn't aware of. I asked the engineer about it, and it was substantial enough of a discrepancy that, you know, it's a concern. So that's why concern. It's just
in those kinds of, Stuart, I would suggest in those kind of cases, what we should be doing is asking for a letter from the soil scientist certifying that the mapping that was done accurately depicts his flagging.
okay.
Because normally when wetlands are flagged in Connecticut, they're numbered. And then the surveyor knows that he's gotten all the flags because he puts the flag numbers on the survey map.
Okay.
And so you can see like WF1, WF2, WF3, WF4. And if there's a missing number, that would indicate that they didn't find all the flags. And I have seen times where there's been a requirement to supply, and we could have this. If you're requiring a certification, if you're requiring the wetlands to be delineated by a soil scientist, then you could require a statement from the soil scientist that the drawing provided accurately depicts the flagging that was done by the soil scientist. And that might be something that could be an additional requirement that might be asked for. Or you could have that as a standard. If wetlands are delineated on a site plan, you have to have a statement from the soil scientist that the delineation accurately depicts the flagging done by the soil scientist.
So that process would begin with the soil scientist.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
It's a little different when we're in an enforcement action than when you're in an application. In an enforcement action, the Wetlands Commission doesn't have a soil scientist, so you have to use the best information that you have. And so in those cases, since most towns don't have soil scientists on hire, basically the agent is identifying the swamps, marshes, and bogs, which don't take a special kind of training. You just have to have enough understanding of the vegetation to say, this is a swamp, or this is a marsh, or this is a bog, or this is a water course.
Okay.
And by the definition of water course. Now, an engineer could put on all the water courses because those are inherent by their nature.
Yeah.
Most of them are.
Thank you.
Ashley, I was looking at page 3
Mhm.
of the application form. And you've got application certifies that, and it says other information may be required from the commission. Application certification that And would you normally have that though for your applications or not? I mean, I would think that, I know in Thompson, they don't ask for this information. That's something that, but yeah, we can ask for it. I know they've done it here in Woodstock. About being within 500 feet of a boundary of an adjoining municipality, or if
Yep.
there's traffic that might be there. Those are usually things that they pick up if you're going to go to a public hearing.
Mhm.
Or we make the determination in-house, like for being within 500 feet of a municipality. There is a requirement that if you're in a public water supply watershed, whether or not you've sent a notification to that water supply company.
Mhm.
I think that's in the original application forms that you had.
Yep.
That requirement.
I did take that application or applicant certification that 1, 2, 3, 4 from the long form.
Yeah, yeah, that's item J.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that's missing that I found from this applicant, these certifications, some of them are required by statute,
Mhm.
some of them are not. So I think if they're required by statute, we should make them provide them.
Okay.
But I'll have to check into which ones are statutorily required and which ones are not for this list. And I think there were standard letters that they used to have for those certifications. Like there was a standard letter, I think, for public water supply watersheds, and I think there was one for being within 500 feet. And I think the responsibility goes to typically goes to the municipality, meaning the Wetlands Commission, to make sure that the notification gets to the abutting municipality. It's not the applicant's responsibility, but you could require it as a copy, that you wanted to have a copy of that. Then make them do it and supply a copy of that, or certify that it's not.
Yep.
I have to be honest with you, I didn't look at this in real tight detail. And I would like to have more time to look at it, before you actually put it into action. Would that be possible, Mark, that we table
Yeah,
this to another?
Let's table this to next month. Yeah, because I see some things that we could blend from the current existing form into the new form that Ashley sent us. So, yeah, I'd like to have a little time to look at this and draw some arrows and yeah.
Bill Rowinski comment on the previous page, the part 2 property site information. Towards the bottom, it says a completed DEP reporting form is required. I think you might want to have an if at the beginning of that sentence.
Okay.
If a completed DEP reporting form is required, please see below.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
I think all of them are required. I think anytime anybody whenever there's a decision made on an application, it's a requirement that the commission or the agency submit the reporting form. So if the applicant fills out a reporting form that's not been signed off yet by the agent, it saves the agent a lot of time. So typically applications should come in with that form filled out as much as possible, but then the agent then can modify it before it's actually sent into DEP. I
Okay,
have
so-
to be honest with you, I haven't sent one in for over a year and they haven't asked me for them.
So is the
That's
wording,
how-
should the wording be changed of that section, or is it better the way it is?
I think it's better the way it is, that they should, I wouldn't use the word completed. I would say, just say a DEP reporting form is required.
Please see below for.
Okay, so then
Attachment, yeah.
shouldn't be a comma there then,
Yeah,
should be period.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense then.
A DEP reporting form is required, period. Please see below. Drop the word completed.
Take out the if that I was gonna put in.
Right, yeah.
Which application is this for?
The permit.
This is the application for permit, the new form that Ashley sent us.
Page?
Yeah, page 2.
Oh, okay, that's why. All right.
Yep, page 2. Section 3, third block. Or second block.
That's where you're gonna have the DEP.
Yeah, right now it says a completed DEP reporting form is required, comma, please see below. So we're gonna drop the word completed so that it'll just say a DEP reporting form is required, period.
Well, I'm not seeing that on my form, so
Oh, wow, okay.
I have a different form. which
Maybe
is-
you're looking at the use permitted as of right form. There's
Yes.
2 forms she gave us.
Yeah.
Don't look at that one.
I got mine
Look
before.
at,
I got mine right out of the gate, so I probably don't have that. That's
Okay.
what.
I think I emailed it to you, Stuart.
Oh, okay, all right, that explains it.
I would probably add the words, a DEP reporting form is required to be submitted with the application.
Okay,
Because just saying it's required doesn't say by who. I
right.
mean, make the applicant submit it. But I want to think about more about what goes on the drawing.
Sure.
Man, a lot of stuff goes on the drawing
So,
potentially,
so.
like
so,
erosion
yeah,
and sediment controls.
Right. So we got a month to work on it. We'll have it on the agenda for next month. Okay.
Excuse me.
Muddy correspondence of lake treatment, Muddy Brook. So yeah,
Wait a minute, bylaws.
oh,
You're
bylaws.
bypassing the bylaws.
All right, go back. What? Let's see. Let me find my bylaws.
Ashley, did you get the the July, excuse me, the June 2019 version of the bylaws? Did I send those to you? Do you recall?
Yes, I believe that you did. We did have an email.
Okay. So I'm going to request that the order of business that's in the ones that's posted right now, the one that's dated 3/01/21, that's the one that came in the packet.
Yep.
If you go page 4, order of business. That's not the correct order of business as pursuant to what we originally had agreed upon in June 17th of 2019. It should read as follows. 1, call to order.
Yep.
2, roll call. 3, appointment of alternates if necessary. 4, action on minutes of previous meeting. 5, pending applications.
There we go. Let's
6,
pending application.
yeah, that's where it changed. That's
Right.
where Tina ended up putting in after she left and came back, she didn't realize we changed it. So it should read, number 5 should be pending applications.
Got it.
Number 6 should be new applications.
New applications. Got it.
Number 7 should be administrative business.
Administrative business. Got it. Okay.
Mhm. And that had a footnote that went with it, which Ashley had. If she has the electronic version of this, she'll have it. It says under footnote for administrative business, subheadings under administrative business may include as needed, wetlands agent reports, communications, bills, complaints, investigations, enforcement, requests for permit extensions, transfers, election of officers, budget requests, and others. So as you need things under administrative business, you just add those in as an
Yep.
item for administrative business.
Right.
And then next was citizens' comments and then adjournment.
Got it.
And that's all that I found that I needed to look at. I had a note for myself when I was looking to prepare for tonight's meeting that I was supposed to draft an ordinance changing changing the number of commissioners, and I neglected to do that. So I've got to go back and do that. I've actually got to pull up the existing ordinance and find out how to redline to create the changes for it, and then I can bring it to next meeting if I can remember to do that. I'm sorry, I had a lot of things going on. I had the metal taken out of my leg, so I'm just healing from that. Kind of been distracted.
Bill Rowinski, along those lines, would be looking at number 13, the conflict of interest and disqualification. But if we're going to change something about the membership in the number of people for quorum, then we need to know that before we probably need to flesh that out and how we're going to deal with that.
Now, I think you would do that separately next year, because an ordinance has to go through a town meeting. It has to go through the Board of Selectmen and then a town meeting. It's quite an involved process. So that could take months.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm just bringing it up as that's something that works along with that too. Unless you
Yeah,
want to
definitely.
discuss that as a separate item, but
Yeah. Yeah, because that would have gone in underneath membership, item 4 on page 1, where it says the agency shall consist of 7 members and 3 alternates. And I was supposed to draft a revision to the ordinance that we could present to the Board of Selectmen, that the agency would consist of 5 members with 2 alternates. So then a quorum would be 3 instead of 4, the way it is now.
yep.
But what about conflict of interest? What was the issue with that?
Well, at the time, I just going back to how the planning and zoning I've seen them do it. I believe if they've recused, a member of planning and zoning has recused themselves, that an alternate is appointed in the person's place, and that alternate stands in that seat for the rest of the meeting. But I don't, if we go by Robert's Rules of Orders, it's vague and it doesn't really give much comment on that. But we should have probably some sort of mechanism in that if in a case like Mark had where he was dealing with family property, that he has to recuse himself. Does that change our number for quorum? And can he re-enter the meeting afterwards? Does that mean he's out of the meeting? Can he re-enter for other business afterwards, or any mechanism such as that?
Yeah, I wonder if FOIA has anything on that.
Yeah,
I wonder
FOIA
if
might.
that's under the.
Yeah. So we'll look at this. I'll just, for the record, I'm going to read the last 2 sentences. It says, in the currently, as it's currently written, in the event of such disqualification, such facts shall be entered on the records of the agency. The replacement shall be selected from alternate members to act as a member of the agency in the hearing and determination of the particular matter or matters in which the disqualification arose. So that says to me that the member can recuse themselves, another member appointed. Once that particular issue or matter is settled, voted on, whatever, that says to me that then the person that recused himself on that particular matter could probably come back in to serve for the rest of the meeting.
All
But
right,
we can get a little more specific on that language if you want, but yeah.
well, I didn't really, it's good that we're discussing that because I wasn't really fleshing that out there, and I just wanted to make sure we had clear procedure on how we were going to handle that.
Right, yeah.
I think the quorum
Well, that just,
thing might be the only thing to consider for that.
Right.
so those are the three areas that we would look at for next meeting?
Yeah.
Would be, is that three or two? Two areas, the
Probably two,
agenda,
yeah.
yeah, and the,
Well, the order of business agenda, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
and then the conflict of interest and disqualification.
Right.
So is this month the month that we're supposed to do the election of officers? Or is that next month? Or did we already do that?
I think
That's
we
in
already did
February. We
that.
already did it.
It's in February, we
We
did
already
that.
did
Yeah.
So if Mark, if you can get the language that you think would be appropriate, or you or Bill get it to Ashley so that she could send it to us and post it to us, and we could render a decision on the bylaws, because I've just given you the language for the agenda,
Right.
the order of business.
Okay, so I'll work on section 13 and you're gonna work on the quorum thing for an amendment to
Membership. The
Right,
order,
right.
the ordinance, the
The
ordinance.
ordinance, right.
I'll try to
Yep.
get that for next meeting.
Okay. So the Muddy Pond application is, again, every now and then, you know, they do a treatment of Muddy Pond, and so they put in the appropriate DEP permit application for use of pesticides. And then they send a copy to us just for our information.
Bill Berwinski, I have a couple questions on this.
Go ahead, Bill.
They, somewhere here, I believe it said for one of the treatments that there's, okay, it's, says the outflow is supposed to be stopped for 7, I forget how many days it was. Do you know if they stop the outflow after any of these treatments, or, I mean, there's testings that are required otherwise. Outflow stopped for 5 days. It's one of the comment pages towards the end. Page before the map. Does anybody see that?
The Department of
Yeah.
Health, the Department of
that's-
Health is requesting that the applicant stop the outflow for 5 days following each application and describe the means of stopping the flow. However, if the outflow cannot be stopped, the outflow must be sampled within 7 to 14 days after each application.
Does anybody know which, if they do that at all, which way they do it?
I do
Now,
not.
when I've talked to the pesticides people in the past about this, initially, you know, I said, we get these applications for pesticide applications, and it's a requirement they're supposed to report back what they did, where they did it, back to DEP. And there was a time when the DEP was starting to develop an Excel spreadsheet to contain the information, but apparently that fell through the cracks. So I don't know who's monitoring this. I would assume, and you know what assumptions do, they make us, that
Yep.
that the concern is it's in a public water supply watershed, and they don't want these chemicals reaching the public water supply. And it's really a health department issue, so I don't know. It says an end of the year report describing the effects and the results achieved is required. So that would have to be DEEP. So the question would have to go to DEEP. Did you get your report? And then DEP would have to pursue it if they didn't, because it would be enforcement under their statutes and regulations. And not, so the wetlands agency could ask for the report if this is the first time with that kind of report was ever required. I don't know what we got last year for this, because I guess they do it every year or almost every year. Would be to ask them, you know, what did you get in your report last year? I don't know if this is a new requirement or not. Ashley, do you know if you kept these kinds of reports or copies of pesticide application forms? Have you
I
found a
don't-
file that?
I don't remember seeing too many, but I could definitely look. I might have just missed them, but I can see if we have anything.
Yeah, see if we got one last year, or the year before for this, and whether or not this same requirement was there. If
Mhm.
the same requirement was there, then to answer Bill's question, we could make an inquiry, or you could make an inquiry to DEP Pesticides Office to find out what their report said.
Sure, I will check on that.
Okay, not
So that
to
way, if they're not providing the report, then they could deny, according to this, it says they could deny applications for future applications could be denied.
Right.
stir up things too much, but a couple other questions. Does anybody know who owns the bed of that pond?
I don't even. I don't
Okay,
know.
because by what justification is Friends of Muddy Pond authorized to treat that body of water? And another question along that is, a portion of the north end of that pond is in the state of Massachusetts. So is there permission and reporting for the state of Massachusetts also?
I wouldn't know. You know, that you'd have to ask the DEM, Department of Environmental Management in Massachusetts. And I don't know who that would be. You know, it's possible that the pesticide office would know who the contact would be in Massachusetts. That's interesting. Interesting. I just had a dam that was unregistered in Connecticut and spanned into Massachusetts. And they registered in Massachusetts, and because it wouldn't fail into Massachusetts, it was registered as a low hazard dam, but it would fail into Connecticut,
Yeah.
but they didn't register it in Connecticut.
I'm looking at the
Well,
topo
they're
map. Looking at the topo map, Bill, it's like, I don't know, it may only be like 10 or 20 feet of the northern tip of the pond might extend into Massachusetts, you know, and that's water coming in to the top of the pond from Massachusetts. So I don't think they're really too concerned about anything that's supplied in the main part of the pond isn't going to go north. It's going to head south and east. The outlet to Muddy Pond is in the southeast quadrant near
Yes,
the town beach.
oh, I agree with you. I'm just saying because if you, in the fishing booklets we used to get for the fishing license, that's Muddy Pond is one of the ponds that either Massachusetts or Connecticut license
Right.
was acceptable
Yeah.
because of that portion in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So it's the question of the AHJ. Which authority has jurisdiction?
All right, that's all I have.
Ashley, I found in my packet that you sent me an agent approval, Mark Vandervoort,
Yes.
32 Perrin Road.
Yep.
And I said, was this, did this have, and that was for, I think, a barn, replacing a barn?
Yeah.
And my question was, on the form, they don't say anything about it, but is there any grading proposed with this barn replacement?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, because
Is
they
it-
don't give enough description on the application form
Yep.
to tell you, you know, is it just simply replacing with in kind with no grading? They should tell us if they're not going to be doing any grading, because if there was grading, then you'd want to know what kinds of erosion and sediment controls they were going to use
Okay.
potentially. And I don't know if they would have needed them or not, but the drawing that they gave, I don't think it's to scale, but I can see the barn on there on the aerial photograph.
Yeah.
So I'm just guessing they're just taking the old barn down and putting the new barn up and not doing anything else.
Yeah. That was my understanding when I talked to them.
Okay.
All right. You have anything else? Citizens' comments? All the citizens have left?
No, there's one still here
Oh,
potentially.
okay. Yeah. Do we have any questions from anybody in the audience or comments? Okay. All right, so our next meeting will be May, what?
Second,
May 2nd. And we'll still hold it as a Zoom meeting, is that what works for you? Okay, good. Yeah, I'll turn my computer on like a half an hour ahead of time, make sure I get all the glitches out. Jeez.
Do you know if we're authorized to do Zoom meetings, continue with Zoom meetings? Because I don't know if that authorization is expiring this month.
I can
I don't know
follow
if the
up.
yeah,
Yeah,
we probably
why-
need to check.
Follow up on that, yeah.
Because my recollection is the executive orders, they started expiring in February. And we're looking, I know in Thompson, they're looking at doing hybrids.
So
Where,
maybe we should, yeah, so if Ashley finds out that it's expired, then maybe we should go with a hybrid meeting next month.
and the only problem with hybrids is that you have to have good recording equipment in the meeting room. If you're going to have the meeting room, somebody still has to run the meeting, run the Zoom meeting. Even though you've got somebody in the meeting room. So
Right.
you kind of need to think about those details. I know in Thompson, they had to actually purchase new equipment, microphones, because people in the audience and sometimes people at the table, you couldn't hear them. You couldn't hear all the commission members because of the way the laptop worked that was doing the Zoom meeting. So they actually had to order mics, and I think they're going to have a camcorder, some kind of camera that because right now when you look at any of they post their Planning and Zoning Commission posts their hybrid meetings on YouTube, Thompson, and all you can see is the public. You can't see any of the commission members. And half the time you can't hear the commission members because they don't have enough mics, because that's a big Planning and Zoning Commission is like, I don't know, like 10 people. And some people you can't hear. So I don't know. I'd like to continue with Zoom. It works for me.
okay. Hybrid is exactly, is just the fact that you can either Zoom in or be in person.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
what-
Yeah. And with COVID, it seems to be going up and down all the time. You never seem to know what's going on for sure with that. But I'll do it in person if we have to. That's not a problem. But don't be surprised if I wear a mask.
I think the Zoom is effective, is productive. It's actually kind of good to be able to look at Google Earth or blow up a drawing right while you're sitting at your computer?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
right now, when I do it, I have two computers running. I have my laptop that I'm on the Zoom meeting because it's got the camera. And then I have my PC, which doesn't have a camera, and that's where I pull all the documents up from. So while I'm talking to you, I'm looking at my computer screen, looking at the documents. Of course, I can't screen share, but I can't screen share anyways because I don't have enough broadband width
Right?
to
It
do
says
that.
says right on
So-
your screen that the but's network bandwidth is low.
Yeah.
And I don't have a camera either, so I'm doing you a favor. You can't see my ugly face.
You need a shave, Stuart.
Wait,
But your voice sounds wonderful.
busted.
I move to adjourn.
Second by Bill Rowinski.
Motion's been made to adjourn by Marla Butt, seconded by Bill Rowinski. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Abstained? So moved.
Marla, take good care of yourself. Wish
Yeah.
speedy
Thank
recovery.
you very much.
And